everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we are going to go ahead and start with the book of Daniel. This is part of a series. We've already completed the book of Revelation, and it was amazing. What we're doing is we're going through the actual scriptures, reading entire books, and then seeing what it says in the student manual for Institute, and then looking at various other bits of information that are relevant to whatever chapter that we're reading. So if you didn't watch the Book of Revelation when we did this, I have a playlist called the Book of Revelation, so you can go there and check that out anytime. And likewise, I already have a playlist called the Book of Daniel, and these videos will be added to that playlist. I don't have an update right now on the Book of Mormon Sharing Challenge because there was one person that reported a baptism. I wanted to flesh out some of the details because I didn't have that person on the tracker yet, so I just wanted to see get more details about how many copies of the Book of Mormon have been shared and stuff like that. So once I get that clear, I'll give you an update in the next video, hopefully. Now, the Book of Daniel has less chapters than the Book of Revelation. If you'll remember, the Book of Revelation has 22, and the Book of Daniel has 10 less. It only has 12. So we're going to be getting through this pretty quick, and in the Institute manual, unlike the Book of Revelation, which was broken up into, I think it was 3 chapters, the Book of Daniel only has this one chapter in the student manual. So I'm not sure how quickly we're going to get through this. Maybe we're going to do 2 chapters at a time. I guess we'll just have to see. So let's go ahead and, before we start, remember, and I always repeat myself just because there's always new people joining the channel. The Book of Daniel and the Book of Revelation go hand in hand. They're really closely related because they have a lot to do with the degenerate kingdoms and empires of the world. They use the same imagery, at least as far as the 4 beasts go. In the Book of Daniel, there are 4 separate beasts. In the Book of Revelation, they're all combined into one because by that point, the timeline had gone through all the different empires and all those different traditions and politics and secret combinations and all that stuff descended through time and basically became one big thing, which is what we're dealing with today. We're dealing with the collection of all the horribleness from empires past, and they're present with us today. So, really, they're companion books. The Book of Revelation is essentially the sequel to this. And so now we're going to go back and look at this, look at part 1. So the Book of Daniel, chapter 1. Daniel and certain Hebrews are trained in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. They eat plain food and drink no wine. God gives them knowledge and wisdom beyond all others. Oh, and by the way, this would probably help. I'm a very visual person, so maybe some of you are too. LDS Old Testament timeline. Okay, let's go to images. I like this one right here the best. Give me just a minute to pull it up. That's not it. What in the world? Okay, let's open this up as a new image. Okay, that works. Okay, this is actually put out by the church. Okay, so we are at the point where the northern kingdom had already been taken away captive by Assyria. You see Assyria up here at the top, okay? And then you have the kingdom of Judah, which remained. So it wasn't long after the Assyrian captivity and invasion that you had the Babylonian captivity. And we all know that this is kind of like where the Book of Mormon starts. It starts before the Babylonians come and conquer the southern kingdom of Judah. Lehi takes off, a branch of the tribe of Manasseh, gone to the Americas, right, to fulfill that plan of the Lord. But the Jews are, at least a lot of them are carried away into Babylon, those that are useful, that have some skills, and whoever the Babylonians wanted. So this is the point that we're at. And this is a really important concept because, like I've said before, you really shouldn't be any stranger to this. The Book of Daniel and the Book of Revelation kind of it's almost like they kind of center on what happened here in Babylon. Babylon is the first beast. Babylon is the first part of the statue in King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And then it goes on to the Persians and Medians. That's the next part. And then it goes on to the Greeks. And then it goes on to the Romans. And then it ends off with where we are today in the last days. So this is kind of like the starting point, what we're about to read of the beasts and King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Okay, so here we go. In the third year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Joachim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. So horrible, horrible start to the book. The Jerusalem's been taken, and then things from the temple have been taken out. People went into the temple that shouldn't have been there and took things from the temple and used it for their own false gods, their own false temples. Okay, and the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and the king's seed and of the princes. In case you don't know what a eunuch is, let's see. Eunuch definition. A man who has been castrated, especially in the past, one employed to guard the women's living areas in an Asian court. So it's like a general. I think there's like that's like the gist of it, essentially. So essentially, what I have in my pasture are two eunuch cows that I have castrated and turned into steers. When it's a cow, or when it's a bull, it turns into a steer, and that's for meat purposes primarily. Okay, but anyway, going back here. Children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and tongue of the Chaldeans, another word essentially for the Babylonians. So see, they're picking the good stuff. They're bringing the people that are actually useful or have some special skill. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now, among these was the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. But Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Really quick, and maybe it'll mention this in the student manual, but I'm thinking what it's talking about here is like non-kosher, um, you know, drink and food, essentially. Um, I think this is my current understanding of the word of wisdom. As far as I know, the word of wisdom as we know it right now has never been in effect until it was revealed to the prophet Joseph Smith. So when I read the Book of Mormon and it talks about wine and the Nephites getting the Lamanites drunk, or when I see stuff like this, at any point of the scriptures, I don't really worry about that, and I think some people do because they think that the word of wisdom has always been around. Now, we don't know. Maybe it was revealed at some point, but we just don't know about it. You know, there are other books of scripture, and not all the truth has survived till today. History has been edited, lost, things like that. So, what I'm going to assume right here, unless I learn otherwise, is that this is probably talking about non kosher meat, and not, I don't know if like wine has to go through a certain process to be kosher, but because back in Old Testament times, that was part of the Mosaic law. There were certain things that would make you ritually impure if you consumed it, or like if you came in contact with the dead body, that would make you ritually impure. So I think that's what this is referring to right here. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Uh, then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. So, hey, you're going to get me in trouble if you don't do this. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and whatever to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, in the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, as thou seest deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these four children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now, at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of the king Cyrus. Okay, and that would be referring to the Persian uh, king or emperor. Um, Now I know, as we're about to read further into the book of Daniel, that Daniel ended up interpreting King Nebuchadnezzar's dream and stuff like that. I wonder what other things, what other use or benefit King Nebuchadnezzar had of them in spiritual matters or whatever, or interpreting things, receiving messages from God, or whatever that the magicians couldn't do. Okay, so that's chapter 1. Let's look and see what it says in the student manual. So we're going to start at the beginning of this chapter, which is called Daniel, Prophet of God, Companion of Kings. Introduction. Like many of his brethren, the prophets, Daniel was prepared and raised up as a minister to kings and emperors. At the time that Nebuchadnezzar first carried the Jews captive into Babylon, about 605 BC, Daniel was chosen as one of the choicest Jewish youths to be taken to Babylon and trained for service in the king's court. Because of his righteousness and sensitivity to the promptings of the Spirit, he was greatly favored of God. And I'm assuming that the same could be true of us. Not necessarily becoming prophets, but um, we all want that favor of God, right? And how did he get it? Because of his righteousness and sensitivity to prompting. So he really listened to the Spirit and acted on it rather than brush it aside or worry about what people think or if you're going to fit in with the crowd. He gave more priority to the sensitivity of the promptings of the Spirit. The Lord blessed him with the gift of interpreting dreams and visions. This endowment soon made him an object of greater attention from the emperor, and he was raised to positions that enabled him to spend his life in service to the kings of the land. He became the Lord's minister to those rulers. He was made chief of the wise men, chancellor of the equivalent of a national university, ruler of all the Hebrew captives, and as governor of the province of Babylon, one of the chief rulers in both the Babylonian and Persian empires. Though at times his life was endangered because of the jealousy of evil men, Yet he lived so perfectly that the Lord continually protected and preserved him. Let me say one other thing right here. There's this like important concept in the scriptures where you always be of service, even if the person that you're serving is not the best person. You don't compromise your standards, but you think about, for example, Ammon in the Book of Mormon that went to the Lamanites and he dwelt among them and served them. You know, he didn't partake of their false traditions and religion, but he didn't like go and antagonize them. Um, because there would be some people in this situation where it's like, this is horrible. The Babylonians have taken us over, and they would dig their feet in and um, think of ways to, fight back or whatever. And that's not always the right answer. In this situation, you kind of like you go along to get along. And here is an example of that. There's more good that came of them just patiently being subject to what happened and doing the best that they could, abiding by the laws of their new land, without compromising their own values, and serving this horrible king, you know. And so when things like this happen now, I think there's a lot of heartburn whenever it's perceived that President Nelson or the Brethren are giving in to the world, to the agendas of the world. I think rather what it is you're seeing this kind of approach, the Lord's approach, where you do what you can, you be of service, you don't cause contention, you stick with your values, okay, but you also um, give honor, appropriate honor to the powers that be. Because if you don't, it's going to be much, much worse for you, right? Okay, so I know that some people struggle with that concept, but it's like the whole thing, turn the other cheek. You don't fight back. Anyway, let's just continue. Okay, so notes and commentary on Daniel. Daniel chapter 1 verses 1 through 2. What was the historical setting of Daniel's captivity? Most scholars agree that Nebuchadnezzar, as a Babylonian prince, was in command of his father's troops in 605 BC when they soundly defeated the Egyptian forces at Carchemish. This defeat marked the beginning of the end of the Egyptian Empire, excuse me, as a world power, and put the known world on notice that it would now have to reckon with Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar pursued the Egyptians southward and dealt them a worse defeat near Hamath in Syria, thus securing Syria and Judea for the expanded Babylonian Empire. As seen in Daniel 1, verse 1, this drive resulted in the siege of Jerusalem in the third year of the reign of Joachim, and in Judah's being made a vassal to Babylon for the next 3 years. Oh yeah, and there you go. This right here, this is the abomination of desolation. This is King Solomon's temple being destroyed. The first temple, King Solomon's temple, the temple that, let's see, King Solomon's temple LDS. Let me just see if I can find a picture of it in one of our own things. It was, this is from the church website. Let me open this up. King Solomon's temple, although the layout was essentially the same, at least the important parts, this is the temple that had the two pillars right here. Okay, these pillars have names. I think it's like Joachim and Boaz or something like that. And it was the first temple, King Solomon's temple, that had this with the oxen, and then I think, oh my gosh, why am I so, the Brazen Sea, I think. Okay, give me just 1 second. Okay, uh, let's do King Herod's, or Herod's temple. let's just go to let's go to the Wikipedia. Open that. So here's Herod's temple, Solomon's temple. You'll notice that. Well, I guess there is still kind of like two pillars here, but I don't think they were named the same as King Solomon's temple, from what I've seen. And the second temple did not have this, and I think it's called the Brazen Sea. Brazen Sea? Yeah, it is. Brazen Sea, Solomon's temple. Or Molten Sea. Let's go to the Wikipedia article. Oh, it goes by either one. The Molten Sea or Brazen Sea. Now, from what I've read, and I've gone to the Temple Institute website. They're the ones that are trying to build the third temple. They've created all the vessels for the temple. They don't really know what this was used for. Some believe that there was like a spout that came out, and it was for like washing and stuff like that. Others do view it as a mikveh, or in other words, a baptismal font. Um, Today, it's interesting because modern day temples have this feature from Solomon's temple, and we use it as a baptismal font. So I'm pretty sure that's what it was back then. It was a mikveh. Um, uh, you know, it's just an interesting thing. But anyway, this temple, the one that had the mikveh on top of the oxen, and Solomon's temple destroyed by the Babylonians. All right. So the abomination of desolation, the first one. At that time, many of the finest vessels of the temple were taken to Babylon as tribute. Selected members of Judah's upper class, which included Daniel, were carried captive to Babylon. Sometime during this campaign, Nebuchadnezzar learned of the death of his father, and within the year he returned to Babylon to be made king. Later, he besieged Jerusalem twice more, carrying off additional captives both times, and eventually destroying Jerusalem about 587 BC. All the evidence suggests that Daniel and his three companions were taken into captivity during the first exile to Babylon. Daniel lived in Jerusalem at the same time Lehi did, though there's no evidence to suggest that they knew each other. That's an interesting thought, because I never really thought about that. I've always thought about like Lehi and Jeremiah being contemporaries, but I never really thought about the fact that Daniel would have been there too, living there at that time. Daniel 1 Daniel 1 verse 2. Where was the land of Shinar? Shinar was the plain of the lower delta country between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, uh, where where they approached the Persian Gulf. It was the ancient land of Chaldea or Babylonia. So it's basically modern day Iraq. Let's go to the map here. No, not images, maps. So here's the Persian Gulf. Isn't that what it just said? It said, yeah, the Persian Gulf in the delta. It's like this area right here. Right here. Right here. Okay, Daniel 1:3. To whom does the word eunuchs refer? Oh, okay. The word eunuch is the English form of the Greek word which means bedkeeper. In the strict and proper sense, they were the persons who had charge of the bedchambers in palaces and larger houses. But as the jealous and dissolute temperament of the East required this charge to be in the hands of persons who had been deprived of their virility, the word eunuch came naturally to denote persons in that condition. But as some of these rose to be confidential advisors of their royal masters or mistresses, the word was occasionally employed to denote persons in such a position without indicating anything of their proper manhood. The word eunuchs signifies officers about or in the palace, whether literally eunuchs or not. So again, it's interesting that the manual didn't really, it only kind of alluded to it, but they castrated, their procreative powers taken away, which is so sad. It's so sad that some people had to endure that because of a jealous king or royalty or whatever. It's sad. Okay. Daniel 1:8. What was offensive about the king's meat? The term meat referred to the food that graced the king's table. The reasons for Daniel's refusal to eat the food may have included the following. One, some of the foods used by the Babylonians were likely among the items prohibited or forbidden for consumption in the Mosaic Law. So, like what I was saying, not kosher. Number two, Babylonians, like other heathens, ate beasts that had not been properly drained of blood and thereby violated the Mosaic law. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially the same as number one, but I guess it specifies that part of it. Number three, the heathens consecrated the food of their feast by offering up part of the food and drink as sacrifices to their gods. Consuming such food would be participating in the worship of false gods. Moreover, food was viewed as contaminated and unclean according to Jewish law when it was prepared by anyone considered unclean, such as the heathens. Daniel was strictly loyal to the Lord and refused to be involved in any practice associated with anything unclean or idolatrous. And, there's kind of like a deeper lesson to that. Like we've talked about many times on the channel, food is like a symbol of what we take into our spirit, essentially, what we consume spiritually. So you have certain animals that would represent like Gentiles, for example. We all know that uh, when the time of the Gentiles was come in, Peter had a vision in which now it was okay to eat these like kosher or non-kosher animals. They represented the Gentiles. And so think about it like this. Today. You have friends that are of the world, and they're feeding you their ideology, their beliefs, their political views, their philosophies, or whatever. They're not clean, and what they're giving you is certainly not clean. Does that make sense? So there's like a spiritual lesson to that. In this case, it was literal. There wasn't anything I don't think really wrong with eating certain foods, but there's supposed to be like a spiritual lesson, especially back then, and especially being taken over by Babylon itself. And there were a lot of Jews that lost their identity because they spiritually ate the spiritually tainted food of Babylon, and they themselves became idolatrous and mixed in with that culture. Daniel chapter 1 verses 12 through 16. What is pulse? Pulse is such seeds and grains as peas, wheat, barley, and rye. Though eating pulse surely would have contributed to the good health of the Jewish youths, they were also blessed by God for adhering to his laws and thus became more healthy than those who ate the king's meat. Okay, Daniel 1:20. What is meant by the terms astrologers and magicians? The Hebrew word for astrologers and magicians is ashafim. Okay, ashafim, that's the Hebrew word, which means an enchanter who uses incantations and who practices hidden arts. These people were frequently associated with evil spirits. Daniel and his brethren were founded in truth and revelation from God, and were thus of much greater wisdom and understanding than the king's magicians and astrologers, which makes sense. And those are things that you want to avoid today. This same kind of behavior, these same kind of schools of thought, these weird things. A lot of times it's associated with like the new age nowadays, although there are different varieties. And when you look at the mystery schools that are frequently associated with secret combinations, they have their own weird occult things going on. Just avoid the occult, whether it's like the deeper stuff or even just like the silly astrology stuff. It's not good. Okay, Daniel 1 verse 21. This is the last one. What was Daniel's term of captivity in Babylon? Daniel was among those of the first captivity, and he remained in Babylon with many of the other Jews, even after most of them had returned to their homeland to rebuild their temple and nation. He was in Babylon serving various kings, though the 70 years of through the 70 years of Jewish captivity. Though there is no indication of his age at the time of his captivity, Daniel 1:21 shows that he lived to at least the age of 80. Yeah, so he was there, uh, like we said, the entire time from being born in growing up in Jerusalem to being carried away captive, all the way until the end when Cyrus comes and liberates the Jews. So, and this is an important concept that we're going to be looking into later on. This idea of the 70 years of captivity. People misuse that prophecy, thinking that it has to do with the last days, and it doesn't. I'll show you why. It's another one of these things that comes from the world of evangelism. I always pick on evangelists, but or evangelicals, but like these other Christians that like get really deep into the eschatology or last days type study, getting into numbers and stuff like that. And this is one of the things that they misuse, and we'll get to that once we get to that chapter. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.